I request you all to take your seats and also invite our speakers.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, in this session. As you notice, the topic religion, morality and ethics is elaborating, in fact, the plenary session of this morning, where we try to reflect on the connections between ethics, religions, and especially also the concept of dignity. We will have 4 speakers in this session, and it's a pleasure to invite the first speaker, who is Dr. Joris Gielen, and he will talk about dignity in healthcare, ethics, education in India. And in his title, you immediately will notice that he makes the link with the session of this morning by reflecting on the concept of human dignity. Now, Dr. Joris Gielen is a scientist educated in religious sciences in the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium. He has extensive experience in India, and he spent a lot of time here in India to do research in the field of ethics, and especially in the field of palliative care and hospice care. And he has also several projects here in the country, together with projects in the US. He is now the director of the Center for Global Health Ethics at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh in the US. So it will be a pleasure to give him the floor.
This presentation is Dignity in Healthcare Ethics Education in India, but as you will see, this is the title that we chose because a lot of what we're going to say primarily applies to India, but as I will also try to argue, our findings have broader implications as well beyond India, and that relates to how we think about dignity and what it could potentially mean. So this is not just my work. I've worked on it with a colleague from AIMS in New Delhi, and along with her, I've been involved in empirical projects studying patient experience, and that also involves studying what religion and spirituality means for their experience of illness, but also how patients and healthcare professionals think about decision making and how spirituality and religion influence their decisions. And one of the things that we start to reflect upon within the context of these studies is what dignity could mean. We have worked in that area, and we've also published, for instance, on what religion and dignity mean within the context of xenotransplants, but also what it means, for instance, more broadly within the Hindu context as it relates to palliative care. So here I'm going to talk about the meaning of dignity in healthcare ethics education, and as Dr. Ten Haven correctly said, it's very much a continuation of the discussion that we had before the tea break. And this next slide, I made the slide a week ago, so it's not that I just recently inserted it, but this is what we had been talking about this morning. So I will read what Ruth Macklin said, because it's a little bit goes against a little bit what we have been saying this morning. So she argues that dignity is a useless concept. It means no more than respect for persons or their autonomy. Appeals to dignity are either vague statements or mere slogans. Although the etiology may remain a mystery, the diagnosis is clear. Dignity is a useless concept in medical ethics and can be eliminated without any loss of content. Now, as we already saw this morning, from an American perspective, where the emphasis is on dignity as it relates to autonomy, this may sound like an acceptable concept, but what we also saw this morning is that there are actually a diversity of interpretations of dignity that in fact go beyond mere autonomy. But that doesn't mean that Ruth Macklin doesn't have a point, of course. And when we look at dignity and how dignity is used in healthcare ethics discourse, very often we indeed see that the concept of dignity is used without any attempt to really clarify what it means. So people use that concept of dignity, they say like, well, because of dignity we should do this or we should not do this. And this is very clearly illustrated in the discussions on end-of-life ethics, for instance. For instance, you have people who are pro-euthanasia in the sense of administering a lethal injection or providing them with lethal drugs at the end. They refer to these kind of actions as death with dignity. So they say because of human dignity we should allow this kind of things. There are other people, for instance the Roman Catholic Church, who argue against this practice, also relying on the concept of human dignity, and they refer to the dignity of the human person. They say, well, every person has human dignity, and because of this dignity we should not provide lethal drugs, or we should not provide give a lethal injection. So this does not mean, I think, that dignity as such is a useless concept, but we must reflect upon what it really means. And when we talk about dignity, we should try to define what it means, and then from there we can try to integrate the concept in our ethical arguments. So what I've given here is a brief overview of different interpretations that dignity could have in common discourse or in ethical discussions. And it's by no means an exhaustive list, but these are some ways that you could think about dignity. For instance, some people use the concept of dignity as referring to kind of gravitas. It's a kind of a posture or grace. So people they tell about people, for instance, that they behave with dignity, right? So they have that kind of posture or general comportment. You could also refer to dignity in the sense of integrity, and you could then define that as kind of living up to personal or social standards. So that person has dignity, that person knows what he or she stands for. Or you could also refer to dignity, for instance, as status, and that would refer to the original concept, Latin concept of dignitas. For instance, it's a noble or elevated rank. So people who are having that elevated rank are told to have dignity in society. And then you have other people who refer to more generally human dignity. So that is a kind of unearned worth or status that all humans share. And that's the kind of dignity that we were talking about this morning. Now, this also means that dignity can have various meanings, various interpretations. So whenever we talk about dignity, we must try to define what actually do we mean when we're talking about dignity. And when we look at Indian culture, at Indian history, we see that also in Indian culture and Indian history, the concept of dignity has been used. And what we also see is that the concept of dignity has been used in very different and sometimes even contradictory ways. And one context in which the word dignity is used is within the preamble of the Constitution of India. So that immediately illustrates actually the relevance of this concept as well. So when we read that preamble, we see there that it starts with we the people of India having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign socialist secular republic and to secure to all its citizens. And then it says justice, liberty, equality, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. So you see here that we have that concept of dignity within the Indian constitution itself. Now, if you really want to understand what the concept of dignity may mean, well, you also have to look at the translation of the text in the languages of India. And for instance, the Hindi text of the constitution uses the word garima, which has a lot of other meanings and connotations as well. But beyond that, there's not a lot of clarification within the Indian constitution as to what exactly dignity may mean. Now, continuing from there, we can have a look at how dignity is used in jurisprudence in India. And when we look at jurisprudence in India, we see that also there, lawyers and judges, they use the concept of dignity to decide about cases and to reach conclusions. Now, the interesting thing is that within these decisions, the word dignity is very often used in a way that is very similar to the American interpretation of the word of dignity. So it there refers to the autonomy of the individual. So humans have dignity, they have autonomy. So because of that, humans persons are allowed to make certain decisions about their treatment. If you want to have more details about how the concept of dignity has been used in Indian law, I refer to that to the article. You will see the citations at the end as well, because I myself am not a legal scholar, so this author has explained it in a much better way than I could possibly explain it myself. Now, this is a very brief overview of the concept of dignity in Indian law and in the Constitution. Now, the interesting thing about the Indian Constitution is that it was written by this scholar here, Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, and he agreed to use that word dignity within the concept of the Indian Constitution, but he himself was actually not a fan at all of the concept. Because he himself saw himself as coming from a low social status. Some people would say that he came from a low caste background. And based on that experience, he saw dignity as something that is possessed, or a quality, or a negative quality you could also say, by people who have higher social status than him. So he said, well, dignity, that is actually something that people of higher social status have, and they expect other people of lower social status to honor that dignity. So from there, he argued that dignity is a kind of social property possessed by those of higher status, and it's actually linked to what he called indignation and haughtiness. So what he meant is that if people think that they have dignity, they will look down upon other people who are lower than them and who in their view do not have that dignity. And as I already said, he connected that with the Indian concept of Varnajati, both of which are sometimes translated in English with one concept, caste, which is a little bit a simplification of it. But basically he said, well, those on top of the caste hierarchy, they have dignity and they expect others to honor that dignity. So from there you could say, well, dignity in the Indian context could actually have a negative meaning. Ambedkar connected it with indignation and haughtiness. But this is not the only interpretation of dignity that we find in Indian culture. And when we look at Indian culture, we also see interpretations of dignity as collectivist and relational. So this is the idea that dignity is actually something that belongs to everyone, and something that is based on the fact that all beings are related. And there are certain thinkers, also more contemporary thinkers, who connect this conviction with ancient ideas. And one of the thinkers is the first president of India, and also a great philosopher, Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan. He's not the only one who thought along these lines. For instance, Mahatma Gandhi developed very similar ideas. So they focus on the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta. It's not the only philosophy, but it's one of the philosophies, one of the ancient philosophies in India. And as per this philosophy, ultimately reality is one. Ultimately, there's one reality, and that is Brahman. So the individual self that is inside us is the Atman, and that Atman is in fact not different from that ultimate reality, or that Brahman. So from there we can conclude that in fact all reality is one in Brahman. And because all reality is one in Brahman, all reality has dignity and deserves care. So here we see that the development of that idea that dignity is not something that only belongs to those on top of the hierarchy, but on the contrary, dignity is something that belongs to everyone. And it doesn't really matter what work you do or how you were born, everyone has dignity, because ultimately we're all one in Brahman. So the logical conclusion of all this is that everyone has dignity and everyone deserves care. So this duty to care was also developed by Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. So starting from that idea that everyone is connected and everyone is ultimately all of us are one. That also means that we ought to care for other people, especially those who are in need and those who who need our help and our support. And Gandhi, in fact, said that there's always something we can do for people. Even if people look most desperate beyond help, he said, always we can offer something, always we can offer care to them. And this idea, this duty to care, is of course also something that is very much part of Indian culture as well. Because in India, there is that idea that we have to care not just for our relatives, but we also have to care for friends, we have to care for guests, and we have even have the duty to care for the whole of society. So there is that whole idea of connectedness. And the idea that you're all familiar with is the idea of Atiti Devo Bhava. So that's also an idea that you find in the Upanishads. So the guest is a form of God, and that refers directly back to that what I just explained. Everyone is connected with that ultimate reality. So in fact, everyone in a way is a form of God. So everyone deserves care. Now, all of us have a duty to care now, but all of us cannot care in the same way. So depending on our position in life, depending on what we can do, our abilities, we can care for others and society in different ways. For instance, teachers can care for their students, they can provide knowledge, doctors can care for their patients, grandparents can provide certain care to their grandchildren, and so forth, and so on and so forth. So everyone can provide some level of care. Now, that care, of course, is a care that promotes dignity and ultimately is a service to God, is a service to humanity, but it's also service to God. So by serving others, we serve God, and that also relates back to what Father Charles said earlier, that we find similar ideas in some of these religions. So, what does this actually mean? Well, when we're talking about ethics education, so what we clearly see is that when we look at the concept of dignity worldwide, we see that there's a lot of different interpretations, and these different interpretations are often contradictory. Now, we also see that within Indian culture and within Indian society itself, there is diversity of meanings and interpretations of dignity itself. So it is important that we don't run away or that we don't deny these differences, but on the contrary, we have to integrate them in our teaching and in our ethical reflection. Because these different interpretations enable us to think about ethical issues from various perspectives. So dignity can mean different things, so we need to integrate these different interpretations, and then we need to try to come to a decision, well, what is actually the best possible way forward, or the best possible interpretation of this concept. So from there, we could indeed conclude that it's important to integrate that analysis of dignity and that reflection on dignity in ethical reflection, but also healthcare ethics education, of course, in India, because a lot of the ideas that I have been talking about are related to Indian society and culture. So that's also what I said in the beginning. A lot of what I said applies to India. But I do believe that it's important that when we're talking about dignity, we also, when we talk about dignity outside India, we also integrate that intercultural, or you could say a transcultural perspective. Because very often when we're talking about dignity, we talk about the American perspective, we talk about the Christian perspective, we talk about the Roman Catholic perspective, but I think it's really important that we integrate other cultural perspectives as well, because that will stimulate our thinking and that will stimulate our reflection. So in that sense, we are convinced that what India has to tell us about dignity is not just relevant for India itself, but I think the broader discourse on dignity across the world would be served well by considering these perspectives. And that's what I wanted to say.
You pointed out in your presentation that dignity is a very crucial concept, but at the same time very difficult to pinpoint exactly what it means, because in practice there are different interpretations. There is a family of meanings related to the concept, and then you also clarified for most of us how the concept is used in the Indian context, and then you pointed out certainly that it is important in the ethical education context to make students aware of these differences of meanings and interpretations of the concept of dignity, not in order to complicate the situation, but in order to enrich the understanding of the concept, because you bring in perspectives from different cultures. And that plea is a little bit very interesting, of course, because it goes against the tendency today to eliminate diversity from the discourse. So we very much appreciate your plea to articulate diversity in the ethical discourse. Thank you very much. So, are there any questions to the speaker? Yes, please.
Coming from my side of the world, right, we have 10, 15 countries, all culturally different, right? And it's a potpourri of multi-ethnic, multi-religious religions. So when we talk about dignity, right, trying to infuse Islamic morality into the current bioethics, or rather the ethical frameworks we have against Hinduism, and which the prevalent framework is very much Christian-based. And that's going to cause a lot of challenge, a lot of cause of antagonism on both sides of the spectrum, whichever side you're on. So in your opinion, how do we start that dialogue of actually trying to infuse these different religions?
Yeah, that's a very good question, especially when you're dealing with diverse student populations, but also diverse healthcare populations. For instance, in the US context, we have healthcare professionals from all over the world. So when you're going to teach or talk about dignity, how are you going to do that? You also realizing, of course, that no one can be an expert in all possible religions, and no one can. Persons who claim to be an expert in all the religions actually have limited knowledge, because it's so diverse. You can never be a specialist. Even those who are specialists in the study of Hinduism, they're generally specialized in one small part of Hinduism. So here the idea of cultural competence actually comes in. So, and the idea of cultural competence is also related to the idea of cultural humility. So that means that you need to have that, even as a leader in healthcare, even as an educator, you must have that openness, but that willingness to learn, and that ability to learn from others, from your patients, but also from your students. Now, you also must have, of course, a certain basic knowledge. That's also part of cultural competence. So you need a kind of base knowledge. So you need to know a little bit about different Indian perspectives, different Islamic perspectives. But that doesn't mean that you must know the details of all these perspectives, because that's impossible. But so when you're teaching, when you're talking to your students, you have to give them the opportunity to talk. So what is what is this concept? What does it actually mean from your perspective? Or what do you think it means? Or are there certain ideas in your culture that you could relate this concept with? Now, it's also important then to challenge them. For instance, if you were to have a student then who would say like, well, for instance, if you would have Ambedkar in your, Dr. Ambedkar in your course, and he would say, well, for me the idea of dignity is related to that idea of haughtiness. And you could say a question like, okay, I understand that for you this idea of dignity can be interpreted in a negative sense, but is this the only way that you could look at that concept from your cultural perspective, or are there other ways? And then you, in a way, start thinking and reflecting along with them, and in that way you're enriching their interpretation, their view on their own culture, while you also developing your own understanding. That's how I go about it.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. We will now proceed to the second presentation, and it's a pleasure to invite Dr. Francis Jude Selvaraj. He is from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and he has extensive experience in the medical field. He told us that he is a doctor with education in geriatric medicine, also a background in bioethics, and he has extensive clinical, pharmaceutical, and clinical trial experience, extensively engaged also with governmental bodies in discussion about reimbursement programs in multiple countries, and he is also leading work on early to late phase clinical studies as a medical lead responsible for protocol development, study implications, pharmacovigilance, and data analysis. And currently he is attached to a global research organization, and he is also the lead researcher for the Catholic Research Center of the Archdiocese of Kuala Lumpur. His topic will be important for the connection between religion, ethics and science, and the title will be "Should Artificial Intelligence Algorithms be Shaped by Religious or Ethical Standards? The Malaysian Catholic Youth Experience." So thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof, for the introduction. Good morning. I am a clinician, obviously, but on this presentation, I'm also actively involved in the youth ministry in Malaysia. So obviously, this data is very much in presentation about the situation of the Catholic youth in Malaysia. And this data is coming out after a very recent meeting that we have. So sit back, relax, and if there's questions, you shoot later. Okay, this is the contents. I'm going to start off with AI and the religious decline. Seen globally and very much seen in Malaysia. I'll show you about that. And then this comes the key question: do these algorithms need to have a religious framework or purely a very secular framework? And that's the crux of the problem that at least my country is facing, and obviously where we stand right now, and how. And topic 3 and 4 are the data that we just collected. And then finally back to the primary question. I have no conflict of interest. So secularization, this is not new. It's been going on for eons, and it's not an ideology per se. I mean, you can talk about wokeism, and that's the new bit. But how secularization and declining attendance in faith-based traditions, be it in church, temples and mosques and so forth. So this younger generation today actually are more likely to explore diverse spiritual paths or identity as a non-religious, reflecting a very broader trend towards secularization. So they're moving away from a concept of religiosity towards being more spiritual. And that's where the social influence also tends to play a great part. How does this work? Yeah, okay. So, and to boot, artificial intelligence, machine learning, name it whatever you want, where there's a scope of intelligence developed by mankind that's shaping the shift that we will see. So now, I'm sure you must have seen, this is the data that shows about religious disaffiliations, and Malaysia is about 2%. Now, obviously, this is data showing conversions, or rather the moving away of religion from Christianity, Hinduism, Taoism, Confucianism. We do not have data of showing youth moving away from Islam to other religions. Obviously, if you're familiar with the Malaysian setting, it's totally banned. I could get sued for apostasy and land up in a dungeon far away. So this data is only Malaysians of Christian faith and the others except Islam. So and there's lots of data that's been published very recently showing that the more people that are exposed to newer technologies, the weaker structured beliefs are. They tend to move away from structure, from nuances where there's a form of a hierarchy. They want to break free because they believe in a sense of a spirituality to oneself, a yearning to find a better self. So this then poses the question, should AI algorithms have a religious or ethical frameworks? Because it's these algorithms right now that have been written, and AI is pushing the youth towards a very spiritual kind of base, moving away from these religious structures. So that's the question. Would would a religious or theological AI framework or secular ethics framework affect this affiliation? Now, currently we do not have any data. There is no data to conclusively say that having a strong faith-based algorithm will halt this trend that's happening, and no evidence at all. And I suppose the topic has become of greater discussion over the few years, at least in my part of the world, is because they've seen some gaps in the algo ethics. They have found that it's not robust enough, at least the situation in Malaysia. We see a trend towards the youth becoming preoccupied with the AI in the Malaysian context. They have spent more time on that. So just as a kind of a brief, the concerns that we have are that these AI algorithms currently do not consider the complete system where social criterion such as fairness, justice, do no harm, especially to physicians like us, and human dignity are supposed to be implemented. So there's a concern from design to actual practicality. There's a huge gap there. Failing to realize that algorithm solutions tailored from one social setting, like the question I posed, when you have a current understanding, rather erroneously, that's a very Western form of ethical base. When you try to put in a country like mine, where you have Islam, Taoism, Confucianism, Hinduism, when you try to put the cultural norms into it, this can lead to a bit of concern, a bit of lack of understanding, and even positive, negative consequences. Then finally, disregarding the complex understanding of the social concepts and based on processes, contexts, and we need to understand all this cannot be done by mathematical models. And I suppose the key thing sometimes, when we look at all these kind of models, we do not acknowledge that sometimes effective solutions is not based on technology, but with a sound understanding of ethical principles, which I believe strongly inspired by doctrines. And that's where dialogue needs to come in. Now, why has all of this happened? The Malaysian Prime Minister recently, if I'm not mistaken, sometime, if I remember correctly, in January, he had spoken to a conference in UAE, if I'm not mistaken. Although the title says, should AI convert to Islam, but his point was that he wanted to see Islamic understanding, in Islamic morality being infused, or rather been part of the algorithms that are being written currently. He doesn't see that because, again, there's a misconception that's a very Western-based ethical frameworks that we have now. I suppose he doesn't probably understand, rather he didn't understand virtue ethics, where you have the very Christian base in it. And that sort of started a maelstrom. There was a bunch of rhetoric that's going back and forth in the media, between individuals, between groups, between religious bodies, at least in that part of my part of the world. So some of them were like the fundamental problem lies in the fact that religious doctrines are inherently subjective and often contradictory, as major religions are understood in various ways depending on cultural and philosophical contexts. But I think the last statement that I wanted to share with you was one written by a liberal Muslim imam, a priest of huge standing in Malaysia at least. And he said it's to educate AI using original scriptural texts that convey core values such as moderation and appreciation of diversity. And again, the context in our part of the world is diversity. And we have a lot of different cultures and and you're trying to incorporate them into some form of framework and understanding. So let me share with you data that we just collected and we can understand where we come from. If you're not familiar with Malaysia, our tagline is truly Asia. We are multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious. Islam is our main religion, yet we still have mosques. I mean, we still have temples, we still have churches. We can build churches. It's not an issue. There is freedom of faith, freedom of speech, not so much, depending on which side of the fence you are on. But basically, Muslim is about those who practice Islam. You're around about 70% of the population. So the rest are kind of, and in Christianity is about 9.5%. So why is it of such a big relevance in Malaysia? 60% of Malaysians actually use AI in their personal and professional lives, 44% in using it monthly, which is higher than the global average. So if in the past 10 years, most of the IT companies, besides Bangalore, they have set up hubs in Malaysia. Malaysia is the largest manufacturer of semiconductors globally. Pre-Trump, we'll see. And anyway, it just to show to you that AI has such a huge influence in my country, right? While the focus, and we have a AI roadmap for Malaysia, which is part of a larger part of the AI roadmap for ASEAN, right? And there's a lot of things in there, but there are huge gaps. One of them is for training, what principles to follow, how to use it, key thing, how to navigate false information, bias, and so forth. So the inherent gaps are the ones that we are still struggling with, at least in Malaysia. So to begin with, the youth population in Malaysia, we've never actually had a survey with them at all. In all these years, we never understood the impact they had in community, in faith formation, at least in our country. So within 2023, 2024, these results came out late last year, January this year. So they sent a huge survey. They used many methods, and the youth population that they got across the country. Let me just show you this, right? It's only 520, but you remember this is 24% of the Catholic population in Malaysia are youth. So you're talking from the alpha generation, 14 years on, to about 25, all right? So it's a huge population, but only 520 replied. So I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done. So they looked at 9 dioceses. If you're familiar with the concept of dioceses, they are kind of like districts, huge districts, right, managed by a bishop, archbishop, depending, right? So it was sent across the country, and then that's Malaysia, of course. And it took a long time, 23 to June of this year. So, but to summarize, these were the key findings. The youth in Malaysia often refrain from expressing themselves, along with their youth ministers and pastoral workers, as they anticipate a certain reaction. It is important to acknowledge that speaking out is not often embraced within hierarchical frameworks. One of the common feedback that we got from the youth were that we were only called, and I quote, we were only called for church meetings or feast days just to move the chairs. You are not meant to be heard, you're not meant to be seen, but just move chairs from point A to point B. Very sad. But this is the reality that I and the hierarchy in Malaysia are facing. Remains a limited comprehension of journeying together which poses an obstacle to comprehensive ministry for young people. Journeying together here is walking hand in hand. So it's a bit of synodality, right? Walking hand in hand with the older person or the most senior person. That cannot, right now that's not happening, right? From the reason that I just mentioned above. And then the last two things, certain areas for collaboration, caring for the environment, ecology, navigating the digital landscape, key thing. And the last bullet point actually took the clergy by surprise. I wouldn't say surprise, but kind of like shell-shocked them. Religion appears to be a consequence of community and local life rather than the driving force. So again, it points down, did we do something wrong in the formative years? Was catechism. If you're familiar with the word catechism, it's the faith formation that occurs during a young person's journey in church. So it is still taking a lot of rethinking among the clergy. So how do we navigate this? So what we did was, we wanted to understand the Catholic youth. How do they use these tools? How does it affect their formation? So we did a secondary survey containing 12 questions, but I'm not going to show all the 12, just the key one pertaining to this presentation. Now we're sent to ArchKL. ArchKL here is Archdiocese of Kuala Lumpur Youth Ministry. It was sent out to about 425 in the first quarter and second quarter. However, the respondents were 94 at the time of preparing this slide. But I'm made to understand we got another 200 posts. So, but looking at that raw data, it showed a similar trend. So what I'm showing you is a similar trend of the rest of the data we got. And then it's based on a bunch of questions. This was the first survey done on Malaysian Catholic youth to gain the understanding. Not been done before. It's, again, as I said, the responding group is small, but it sort of gives you a flavor of where we are right now and where we should head. So, how do we feel about using AI? This is almost similar to findings by in global settings across the board. It's almost similar. What 48% here were confident. Those neutral 31, 5.3 and 9. So, but for the sake of policy making by the clergy, they wanted to include the neutral in those that were not confident, because then they could build up policies around it. So you're talking almost 52% were not confident in using AI. AI, does it have ethics and morals? So 36%, 25%, 22% believe so. The next bar chart, who should be accountable for ethical and responsible AI use? 41.5% believe individuals, and that's the crux of this presentation. 41% believe that they need self-regulation, or rather they are responsible for themselves. They are supposed to have inherent self-regulation. And during the plenary session, humans are supposed to be inherently good, right? It's the moral issue that clouds that inherently good. And from our setting, we begin to see somehow this inherently good doesn't really work, because I will show you stuff that might surprise you a bit. So, does AI have emotions and empathy? That's pretty normal. Okay. Then this is the second part, that's can AI influence my religious practice? So you're looking at almost 50% believe so. It moves them away from structure, hierarchy, to a more spiritual element, where it's about attaining self-satisfaction, self-awakening. And this, it shows to some extent, and which I made it very clear, is a failure on our part that we somehow did not give a strong foundation to this youth. Now, AI allows me to be more spiritual and less influenced by established structures. So, oh, sorry, I think it moved, right? Oh, sorry. Okay, let me just quickly, 2 minutes? Right. So finally, many individuals, so these are the key findings of that study. So it kind of just summary of what I just said. So now, obviously this has been a debate of whether the faithful religion should strive to have a more visible position in the secular world or remain faithful as a minority. For Christians, it's crucial to balance the concept of following Jesus as a choice while emphasizing the significance beyond individual identity. So the point is we need to try to infuse some form of religious framework into ethical framework. However, the bigger question, and this is the last 2 slides, however, the bigger question is while we can have a cerebral discussion of whether AI algorithms are good or bad, at least for the Malaysian youth, without some form of foundation on self-regulation, without understanding clear ethical principles, without understanding any form of principles, how do you self-regulate? Now, this came out in May. I don't think you can read it, but let me just read it to you. This was an incident that occurred from a student, involving a student in the southern part of our country, allegedly using AI to create and sell lewd images of classmates in a deeply disturbing wake-up call for Malaysia's education system. This student was standard 5. Okay, standard 5 I think is about 12 years old. He was beginning to sell lewd images of students. So, where's his moral compass? And the conundrum continues. Our medical colleges, training ethics is not a priority at the moment. So forget talking about bioethics. If you don't understand the 4 principles of ethics at all, for medical undergrad students, right, I think we are a nation that really needs to work hard. So quickly. So last statement, the youth are not the future, so while we say for the statement, it's an imperative for future generations, I may beg to differ, it is an imperative of today. If our youth are the future, then we need to start working now. So thank you. Sorry I took too long.
Thank you so much for your presentation, because you raised interesting questions about what kind of values are expressed in IA, and also what are the implications of these developing technologies for religions. And then you illustrated with data about Catholic youth in Malaysia. We have time for one question. Bert Gordijn.
Yeah, I think the question of having AI systems comply with a set of values has, you could go for very specialized large language models that are trained on a canon of religious texts.
Right.
They would be very good at answering religious questions. They would probably be better than religious scholars, but they couldn't be used for coding very well or for other purposes. So that would be a problem. There's also a problem of confabulations or hallucinations, because these are, in the end, probabilistic systems. And the question is, would people be interested to use those specialized systems? So I see the point that it might be good to have systems that comply with a set of religious values, but I think technically it's very difficult to realize.
So we have the third speaker, Paulachan Kochappilly. He is a professor of theology at Dharmaram College, Bangalore. So he will introduce himself for a minute at the beginning. But he has a fascinating topic. As the celebration, so is ethics education. Celebrations are channels of ethical education. When I went to school as a child, if I had a chance, I would not have gone to school because going to school is a burden. Now, education as a celebration is a contradiction for me. Education is often a burden. I have to go to school, I have to work hard. They will tell you will have a bright future if you work hard now, but currently it's not a celebration. But we have a fantastic proposal that the entire education process should become a celebratory process. And then celebrations have to have an educational content. So it's a fascinating thesis that Father is going to expose. So please, this podium is yours. Yes.
Thank you, Stan, for your words of introduction and welcome. I would like to start with what you really said about your childhood experience. What I intend to share with you is that home is the best place to celebrate the vision, the values, and the virtues. So you don't have to go to school to be ethical in your thinking, imagination, and decision making. Wherever you are, whatever you do, is in fact a fitting ambience to celebrate your life. And I think celebration is the foundation, so also force and focus of our life. Who does not want to celebrate life? I think in this whole, everyone wants to celebrate life. And all what we do is to enhance our celebration. My friend Francis also was speaking about Malaysian context and the youth in the church. It is to enhance the quality of their moral life and their, ethical value system. So everything is driven by celebration. Celebration is the catchword for education, in my understanding. Celebration is all-inclusive and it does not eliminate anything. Where there is two, there is a celebration. And I have put these simple pictures. I don't know whether you can see, there is water, there is earth, there is air, there is fire, and there is sky. So we need to relate with all these things in order to be ethically sound and also to celebrate our life. And therefore, the title of my presentation is, As the Celebration, So is Ethics Education. Whatever be the context, celebration makes a difference. The content, celebration makes a difference. And the whole orientation will be different if we pick up the values, virtues, and the vision in and through celebration. And therefore, celebration channels of ethics education. As education, so is the ethics. Education is to lead out or to bring up. Ethics or dharma or niti is to support or guide persons in their journey. Celebration brings the finest in a person in view of the past, present, and future. Education, ethics, and celebration evolve around persons in the context. We have been speaking about cerebral things. Cerebral. I think we need also cordial and celebrating aspects for our life. The focus of education and ethics is celebration of life. That's what I want to present for your consideration and for your critique. And therefore, ethics is for life and its celebration. So also, education is for the celebration of life. Celebration, the catchword of education. I don't know how to dance, otherwise I would have danced. Yesterday, you might have had a wonderful cultural evening. You might have picked up a number of values from that. Much more than what we might have imbibe from our conference, lectures and talks. This is what I'm saying. So celebration is education and education is celebration. Education is for life. I'm not presenting any novel idea here, but I'm just reiterating what we have been saying or what we have realized, but in a novel framework, that is celebration. Ethics is for the celebration of life. If ethics is for a celebration of life, if education is for the celebration of life, why don't we really invest our time, energy, and also talent in enhancing the celebration of our life, starting from our family to the global arena? Celebration embraces God, creation, and also human beings. So I always think of triadic relationships, so triadic realities. So triadic relationships shape and sharpen ethics education. Yesterday my friend Walter was speaking about creative ethics. Yes, so without creation we cannot have creative ethics. That's my understanding, because relationship is very important. He also spoke about material things yesterday in the parallel session. So as the relation, so is the celebration. As the relation, beginning with our family life, our societal life, ecclesial life, institutional life, global life. Ethics education on a celebration key. We don't have cake here, otherwise I would have asked the chairpersons to cut a piece of cake and distribute. That will make our life more sweet than all these talks. Anyway, there will be dessert served at the lunchtime. Wait for that. So celebration incorporates all possible windows of wisdom. Visual, verbal, symbolic, conceptual, artistic, abstract, sound and silence. So celebration is something very, very comprehensive term, at least in my understanding. Even the AI is also promoting the celebration of our life. Holistic program involving every area of life is the beauty of celebration of life. I'm not speaking about any celebration and every celebration. Celebration of life. So celebration of life transmits values and virtues for transformation. Celebration is the parameter of ethics education. So we can enjoy the beauty of dance. And we need to dance to the rhythm of the world and of our people and also of God. So learn to celebrate. When we see the smile of Olinda, we are all attracted to that. So that is how we can celebrate. Smile can disarm, that's what we are told. That's also celebration. Learn to celebrate, love to celebrate, and live to celebrate. That is what I would propose for ethics education. It should be intelligent, rational, at the same time there should be celebration of all what we are exploring and really expressing. Celebration is central to life's flourishing. Celebration springs from truth, justice, freedom and charity. I don't know which comes first, dignity or autonomy or freedom. All these things are needed. This is what I feel. Because we are complex and we need all different relationships, covering all areas of life and activity. Celebration of education and ethics is a promissory note. Renewing and rejoicing, a reconciliatory path. beginning with family and reaching out to our world family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So celebration as the school of ethics education is incredible lesson of children imbibing values and virtues staged in family. Believe it or not, what we are today is because of our formation in the family. And why things go wrong today? Maybe because there is no celebration of love, life, and commitment in the families. And therefore, homeschooling is also very, very good. Ordinary children resemble their parents in their moral world and person. Ethics education by seeing, by doing, and by living. So, celebration is the key to ethics education. I would say celebration as the breath for life. The heartbeat of ethics education is celebration. Unless and until what we talk, what we share with others, even now what I do, does not resonate with your heartbeat, it is of no use. And you will fall into sleep. And I am happy because you are breathing in order to live. Every stage of life calls for celebration. Human life begins with the celebration of love and life of the husband and wife. So flourishing takes place in, through, and for the celebration of life. Every breath fuels life celebration. Awakened consciousness, sign of life and celebration. I think you can identify the stages of the celebration of life in our ordinary lifespan. So everything is important, everything is to be celebrated, and everything must be beautifully celebrated. That must be the beauty, joy, and glory of the celebration of all this. Celebrate life in all circumstances. I think we were celebrating before the beginning of this parallel session because something went wrong with the technology and therefore we had time to talk to each other. That's a celebration. Technology gave us a little space to have a conversation. The smile, you see, which is very, very promising. So celebration encompasses life and ethics education. Life is a celebration. Celebration is the sum total of relationships. Celebration fashions life and its spectrum. You might be familiar with this family photo of Grahamstein's. So celebration houses and transmits ethics education for the transformation of people, Graham and Gladys Staines. It's wonderful to listen to what she said. And that is a celebration of her faith, her values, and her vision. It is far from our mind to punish the persons who were responsible for the death of my husband Graham and my 2 children. But it is my desire and hope that they would repent and be reformed. Celebration of seasons captures ethics education. I think we need to enjoy the weather. This morning, Renzo was telling me this campus is beautiful. There is a lot of greenery, there are a lot of flowers. Very often who live in this campus may not notice that. We may have to have people to come from Italy to enjoy this beauty. Mali or Malik? No, I think we should be Mali and Malik. We should be servants and masters of the beauty that is surrounding us. Change of seasons unfolds celebration of life. Ecological sensitivity and relationality of ethics foundation. Sacramentality of creation and ecological responsibility is also part of our celebration of life. integral ecological ethics education need of the hour. So celebration of reality, relationality, and rationality. So these are three important words for me. Reality, out there. Rationality is something which we have to uphold. So also relationality, which we build up. And these three things will help us to celebrate our life. Acknowledgement of the wire of reality, rationality, and relationality promotes celebration and ethics education. Ethics education is in integration, inclusivity, and integrity. Whatever be the field of life, ethics education is in the embrace of truth, goodness, and beauty. To render that in our cultural heritage, Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. Whatever is Satyam, whatever is Shivam, whatever is Sundaram are to be beheld and celebrated. So celebration of life encompasses ethics education, visual education. I would say, as you see, so you act. Immersive education, as you involve, so you internalize. Participatory education, as you participate, so you practice. And playful education, as you play, so you perfect your value system and education. I'm drawing your attention to the Leelas. No, Leela. Our life must be a Leela, a playful enactment of all the vision, values, and virtues that we have in us and around us. So you see, celebration of creation, people, and God. That's the basics of ethics education. There's a beautiful earth there, and there are people, and there is a hand. So we have to recognize, respect, and respond to these threefold realities and build up our relationships with these realities so that we have a rationality to relate with all these and become whole, holy, and happy. And for this, I take two texts to emphasize. Angelic hymn at the Nativity of Jesus is a type of ethics education celebration. Param dhamni parameshwarasya stuti mahima prithvi mandale sarvesham shandir bhavadu manavaya cha mangalam shubhasha sarvada. So this is nothing but the angelic hymn. Glory to God in the highest, peace on earth, and hope to all people. So glorification of God, establishment of peace on earth, and rendering hope to human beings form a very important understanding for me to have a holistic celebration and healthy celebration and lasting celebration. I also would like to quote the first verse from Ishavasya Upanishad, and that also sets the tone, how we can go about celebrating our life. Ishavasya vidam sarvam yatkinja jagatyam jagat tena tektena bunjidha magradaha kasya sviddanam. That means the Lord pervades and permeates the whole world, moving and unmoving, or non-moving. So enjoy this world with a sense of renunciation and don't covet the wealth of others. Conclusion. Celebration is in harmony and happiness. So celebrate whatever is ethical and educational, meaning enhancement and excellence. Celebrate reality, rationality, and relationality. Celebrate truth, that which exists, sa asti, that is the definition given to truth. So celebrate truth, goodness, and beauty. Make life a celebration of ethics education. All for life, life for all for joy, joy for all. It means a lot. So recognize, respect, respond all persons and the whole person. Thank you for your patient listening.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I think you have taken us to another planes and all that. I was thinking of Sahana Avatu, Sahana Ubhunaktu, that we may be together, we may grow together, we may love each other.
Right.
So the wonderful thing that happens in the education. So you told us about the goals of ethics and education. It's a celebration in life. And then I think the Lixith knows, Pope Francis reminded, I think for the last 400 years we have given too much place for the heart, head. We have to go back to the heart. I think Descartes and all that have said we have only head, now we'll have to go back to the heart and then begin to overcome the otherness and discover the communitarian dimensions. So it's a wonderful that around the theme of celebration you have told the goals of education and then what ethics are. So wonderful. A couple of comments or questions, please.
I hope you invite me for cake after this question.
Yeah. Rasagulla may be served.
Yeah.
Rasagulla may be served.
Okay. You talked about celebration of life, ethics education. The three monotheistic religions, right? We understand suffering is part of redemption to salvation. Buddhism believes that you go through nirvana to attain enlightenment. You go through karmas to get there. However, there's a branch of Buddhism which believes that to manipulate the sufferings, okay, you can actually hinder this celebration of life, as you say. Now, I'm a geriatrician, as you know, okay, and I am faced with a lot of my elderly patients talking about euthanasia, right? I've had too many to count, I remember. Now, at that most point where they are really suffering, as a physician, I cannot be talking to them about celebration of life. It's difficult. It takes a lot out of me to try to tell them, I mean, at that point, right? I mean, you give them some time, obviously, they will understand it is redemption and so forth and so forth. But at that point, when the suffering threshold is so much, it totally negates all of this. Yeah. So my question is, how do we go about this? I mean, yes, I don't pretend to know a lot about this. I still struggle. That's my personal struggle. But how can you help me to still face this with my other patients?
Yeah, with all humility in understanding your specific question, and that is very valid question, I would just say embrace the reality with rationality and relationality. I'm not going to preach there. I'm embracing. See, the greatest love ever celebrated is in silence. Just embrace. You don't communicate there in words. And that silent embrace will give a lot of meaning and purpose to be what they are. If you are going to convince them through argumentative statements, it may not be of any help to that suffering patient. So embrace the suffering. Not telling you embrace suffering, that is not what we have to say. But we also are part of that suffering. If we can emotionally really reach out to that person, that may be a way, that may be a way, I'm not saying the way, and for helping that person to acknowledge what he or she is and celebrate their life. And there we have a beautiful symbol of Jesus on the cross. I mean, from my faith perspective, I would say.
You have one more question. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, we have one more question, please.
Thank you, Paulachan, for that presentation. To me, it looks like utopia, the celebration of life, or eudaimonia in terms of. You spoke about ethics in terms of the home and your community. But I would take up what Ten Harvey said this morning about ethics education starting with indignation of the injustices that you see, the wrongs that you see. You spoke about recognizing the beauty of the garden, but what about recognizing the smog in the air and therefore where it is coming from and taking action or understanding? Or in the home, when a child is getting abused, or for the woman who is handling, sleeping without food because she's handling limited resources. So how do you talk about celebration? Isn't that then saying we are being pacifist and saying we are accepting this as as fate or a norm and not becoming indignant to address injustice?
Thank you, Manjaliga, for your very engaging question. I think I'm not running away from reality. No, we have to embrace the reality. Without acknowledging reality, there is no way for celebration of life. So first and foremost, we have to recognize the reality. If there is injustice in our system, in our society, in the air, as you said, we should think about our Diwali celebrations, our Christmas celebrations, where we have a lot of crackers. At least we begin in a small way. So you have introduced something here. The organizing committee has. There will be no water bottles here. Why? Because that is a reason-given way of celebrating drinking water and also not using plastic bottles. Correct? So we have to really address the reality, acknowledge it, and rationalize it, and then make a relationship, whether what happens in the family context or in the society or in the institute. So injustice must be addressed. There is no excuse for that. But only by having some kind of utopian idea, we would maybe be able to move in that direction. Otherwise, if we don't have any ideal before us, we will have no energy to go into that direction. I'm not saying that we will be always be in a mood to celebrate, but at least we should aspire for it. We should work for it. And that itself is very encouraging and empowering. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those who have questions and comments, we will reserve the table for lunchtime with Father Paulachan. So you can have sweets and the question answers with you. So the final person at this session is Walter Fontanini. I think the last question is the connection. How do we deal with the struggles and sufferings in life, especially if it is death? So the topic that we are given is the fear of oblivion, ethical perspective on digital immortality and cyberthanatology. That means our understanding of death and how do we grapple with death, and then especially with the AI and the cyber technology trying to interfere and disrupt our understandings and then try to artificially keep remembrance. How do we struggle with that? So it's a fascinating topic. So the floor is yours.
I'm in a very difficult position now because after these 3 excellent conferences and lectures and before an excellent lunch, so it won't be easy. I'm going to pay respect to your blood sugar now and to proceed with the slide. Digital immortality and cyberthanatology. We're going to talk and to use and pay respect to the Mexican culture with a nice movie, 2017, Coco, talking about death and afterlife. And actually, Coco, the protagonist of this movie, will be my assistant in this presentation. So in any single slide, you're going to see some ethical questions about education raised from Coco. And thank you, Coco, in advance. So let's begin with the definitions, of course, explicatio terminorum. So digital immortality. Digital immortality, first of all, is a process of simulation. Simulation of a person's identity beyond death using AI. And it's starting from 2 different fears. And we will see the power of fears in that. From one side, as an anticipation fear from the future deceased person, the fear of being forgotten. So we had a lot of initiatives in the past, like dedicating, we have seen some rooms here, or dedicating some chairs in the temple or whatever. Now some people is building a virtual memory of themselves to give to the surviving people. Or, on the other side, it's a kind of technological defense against the pain of letting go. So we have two fears and two pains. The pain to be forgotten from one side, and the pain to release the memory of the person from the other side. And on this basis, we have cyberthanatology. Cyberthanatology is a kind of interdisciplinary study about the use of digital technologies in order to mediate the experience of death, grief, and remembrance. We have a lot of AI application, like Simulate the Death, Project December. We can now simulate a text-based conversation with anyone, including someone who is no longer living. Get started from $10. Your story, your voice, eternal mind, eternal AI, the AI companions, always here to listen and talk. You see that it's interesting or scaring, as you want. And there is now one video that I would like, just a 30-second. It's disturbing. We can understand the pain of the mother, but in my opinion, the most representative image was the green screen. The green screen is something that it's absolutely virtual. It's not present, you know. It's a kind of a missing of identity. And this is why Coco is raising the question. So what we are assisting now is the dawn of digital immortality. Everything began in 2020 when Microsoft deposited the first patent about the so-called dead bots. The dead bots are AI application in order to replicate the identity of the person, uploading memories. So you upload a Facebook account, Instagram account, posts, email, voice, video, whatever. And these applications are capable to replace somehow the memory of the person. But of course we are talking about a fragment of identity, and it's raising ethical concern. The consent of the person was agreed or not, so it's a memory or a distortion of memory. And we can refer to a very ancient question from Plato in the Republic, the concept of mimesis. This simulation truly reflects the essence of the person, or it's just an imitation. So if we see from a philosophical point of view, we could refer with an interesting approach to Paul Tillich. In 1952, he wrote a book, The Courage to Be, referring to Kierkegaard, actually the meaning of anxiety in 1876 or something. According to him, we are living with the so-called existential fears. We have fears embedded in our humanity. 3 in particular, called absolute fears, and 3 that are the relative fears. Death and faith, it's the fear of biological finality. The guilt and judgment, the moral exposure. You know, I would be considered and judged by my sons on the deathbed. Emptiness and meaninglessness, it's the fear of ontological void. And these fears intensify as one approaches the end of life. I'm working as a clinician in hospice and palliative, in the so-called dignity therapy. And the dignity therapy is a part of narrative therapy when we are helping the patient in order to rebuild the dignity of the life because they are facing the existential questions. From another point of view, John Locke was talking about personal identity in terms of memory continuity. So AI is looking for to re-elaborate all the traces in order to simulate a kind of selfhood. But there is no lived contest. So this is why the question, is it ethical to reconstruct the person narrative without the authorship of the person? because we are facing the risk of manipulating the memory, the absence of the subject as a narrative and moral agent, because he's dead, of course, and the last question is normative question. Who is going to shape and safeguard digital memory? We have no regulation. It's a gray zone, to say the least. We have another interesting approach is by Paul Ricoeur, 1992. Identity is a narrative, a dynamic, an interpreted process. AI, from another point of view, is static, it's fragmented. So there is a kind of ontological difference, and ethical education has to cover such kind of difference, considering the algorithm interpretation that we discussed, the narrative integrity, and the politics, the memory politics in the digital system. From a psychological point of view, from another side, we have different models, but Ströben-Schuld has a dual process model that could be interesting from this approach, stating that grief is meaning-making. Grief is a kind of pendulum and is moving between the loss-oriented and the restoration-oriented dynamics and behaviors. So the grieving individual is constantly a kind of oscillation in order to have an identity reconstruction. What happened that we have a psychological risk in the age of AI and the age of dead bots. Dead bots hinders oscillation, is freezing the pendulum in one side in a kind of unwanted digital haunting, and causing emotional dependency, disruption of mourning, avoiding of loss, and what in psychology we call prolonged grief disorder. So I'm really sorry again for the mom, but she needs help. Because in this case we see that she was frozen in the documentary. I hope that in real life she was able to overcome, but she was frozen in one part of the pendulum. So digital immortality from this point of view, from a psychological point of view, may interfere with the natural process of grieving, because it's suspending the reality of loss and is blocking the narrative reconstruction. We have the right to be forgotten. It's the only right that has been established by the European Union in the GDPR. We have also the right to be remembered in an ethical way. And we have to define the narrative and not that bot. Because in this case, we are replacing memory with a simulation, distorting or simplifying the complexity of our life. And of course, it's delaying emotional separation and creating an emotional dependency. And so our goal in ethical education is to teaching how to die well, how to be remembered justly, and how to mourn with discernment. In the conclusion, teaching death, because death is not just to log out. So the process of death, it's much, much more existential, ontological, and deeper, of course. And digital immortality is okay, can offer promise and risk, but we have to strike a balance between innovation and existential integrity. Because ethical remembrance is essential, because authenticity cannot be uploaded and dignity is not downloadable. Thank you.
I'm sure there are lots of spirits in this room listening to your talk and about the death and how to live well and how to die well, the right to be remembered and the right to be forgotten. I think you have alarmed people very much with this wonderful talk, connecting things, the meaning of being remembered, and then how the disruptions by these technologies and especially AI. So please, your comments and questions and observations. Please.
A wonderful presentation, and I think this was yet another topic which I wasn't aware of this term till I met you yesterday and you spoke about this topic. So thank you, it was very beautifully done. What I was wondering is that, do you think it's now important, because sometimes we realize problems have occur only after it's already moved on. Do you think it's worth for the mental health fraternity to request for some kind of stopping this kind of AI, because you're really exploiting vulnerable people, and when people are grieving, they're really vulnerable. So do you think there's a space for that? Because whatever people use technology for their personal narrative, or people may record things to inform their children, that is fine on a personal space, but the moment you bring business and profit, it is a problem. So do you think there's a space for the mental health fraternity to actually intervene here now?
Thank you for the question. For sure, there is a call of action in order to have a kind of regulation. I'm referring to a concrete example. There was a young lady who uploaded the memory of the grandmother. She was very attached, so it's a kind of attachment theory. And she was the person who was dealing in her childhood. And he got a very nice feeling, and he decided to go in one of these chatbots. And she was talking, let's say virtually, with her grandmother. And at a certain point, it's a concrete case and real one. At a certain point, she asked the grandmother the recipe of lasagna. The AI replied and told to the lady, "Don't worry about lasagna. There is a special offer in a restaurant close to you." So, the problem is about the commercification of grieving. Because we are talking, as you said properly, about a vulnerable person. And this vulnerable person is the person who is uploading memories, and then they have to pay $10 per month, or second death, the person will be deleted. You see, the problem is not so simple, and for sure we are facing such kind of legal lack and gray zone. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for that presentation, which is about the autonomy of the person who has passed, and whether they have agreed to use, themselves, their voices and their face and whether that such a thing is, something that we have to also think about and maybe regulate. I've heard that already there are in existence in the teaching space. For example, BBC Maestro has converted Agatha Christie into a kind
BBC,
of
actually.
BBC, yes.
Yeah, BBC.
Yes, so teaching students about crime writing.
Correct.
And they have the permission of the family of Agatha Christie. She could never have conceived in her lifetime that this would have been an option which she had to agree to or consent to. So consent then goes into the hands of the heirs, and there's a limitation, of course, that they have placed on what can be said are her words and what are not. But then doesn't this open up a space where these prominent figures that can influence populations, influence people, can then be used for messaging which is probably not desirable for our flourishing?
We have one more question, then you can take both.
Okay.
AI confessional, and people feel there is more empathy, less judgment, more access to this AI, whatever, whoever you call the priest or the person in that confessional. So my issue is about the capacity, competence, availability of the alternative.
Thank you. Very basic principle, the principle of autonomy. And of course it's different when the person, as we have seen in the first slide, in a kind of anticipatory movement, is uploading from themselves. But it's from this point of view, it's like to create a collection of YouTube video, private video for my kids. Okay, so it's I can do it, so it's no problem at all. The problem is the key word is the agency. So who is doing? I'm doing for myself with my full autonomy, or my sons, my grandsons are doing in order to recreate an ideal identity. So how do they want to remember? And most probably such kind of identity is not mine, most probably. But yes, autonomy is one of the most important points. And again, we have the right to be forgotten, but no one is telling us about the way to be remembered. And about this point, you are touching a much, much wider problem that is called e-mental health. E-mental health is not only for grieving, but about virtual therapists and CBT therapy and psychological therapy, normally with teenagers. And teenagers also, because we have a kind of digital divide between teenagers and elderly people that are not able to use maybe properly a psychologist app. Yes, we have to face the problem. Two problems. So the first one is that this is an algorithm. So we are facing a bias algorithm, and we cannot identify therapy with a logical algorithm. Therapy is much, much more. When the person is coming for a therapy, I'm analyzing the body language, the words, the tone of the voice. If I'm texting, the AI cannot analyze my, for example, hidden suicide intention. But from the other, of course, AI is 24/7. And a virtual psychologist may cost about $100 per year. So we have to face all the parts. I'm not automatically against, of course, just we need a regulation. And we have to introduce a kind of hybrid approach between humans and AI in order to have a more efficient way in order to solve the problems. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much for your intros of this session. We heard many interesting ideas. And in regard to the last presentation, we can also remember that there are many new issues in bioethics, but there's also a recurrent trend of issues. Because I remember not so long ago, we were talking about the issue of immortality in relation to cryotherapy. And there's still many people in the US who believe that if you have your head or your total body, but preferably your head, stored in a freezer, then in the future they can revive your personality. Maybe 25 years ago, we had a similar debate about cloning, which is also with the promise to be creative in immortality and to reproduce a person and clone the person. And many people now in the US, for example, also, they use cloning to make another copy of the dog or the cat they believe. And they also some people believe that we can clone people. So this is a new, completely fascinating field. At the same time, it revitalizes some issues that have been on the agenda of the bioethical debate for a long time. And so not everything is new, but there are more fundamental issues that are returning all the time. And that also is important, I think, in education. We have new issues, but we also need to rely on much older trains of thought or domains of thinking that are also important to look into. So thanks very much for all the speakers and for you, the audience, of course. And I think now we have a celebration. A kind of ceremony to thank the speakers